The following content depicts found footage, audio recordings, and assembled files. The events, locations, and individuals depicted are fictional to ensure anonymity. Viewer discretion is advised. Share your experiences and reactions in the comments. They may be used in future studies of unexplained phenomena.
The room they don't clean. The red light blinked twice before the lens stabilized. My reflection flashed for a second on the tiny monitor. Pale face, sleepless eyes. I adjusted the strap around my wrist and muttered into the mic. Night inspection. Harper, David. 2 o'clock hours, East Wing. The hallway ahead was dim, the kind of dim that makes you see movement where there's none. The bulbs buzzed. A soft, electric hum under the faint sound of air vents. I walked slowly, camera pointed forward. Every step echoed. The floor tiles reflected streaks of gray light. Administration asked me to record this one. I said quietly. Repeated electrical failures. Same corridor. 3 nights in a row. Something about documenting the silence of an abandoned ward felt wrong, like bringing sound to a grave. I focused on the camera's display, the frame jittering slightly with my steps. At the far end, flicker. I turned. One of the overhead lights blinked twice, then went dark. Static interference scratched through the audio channel. Double quotes. ... Okay, I whispered. Still happening. The corridor breathed. I swear it did. A pulse in the walls. I wrote that down on my clipboard even though I didn't believe it. Then I aimed the camera forward again. Inspection log started. I advanced through the East Wing. The lens captured peeling paint and closed doors, all numbered in black vinyl. I counted under my breath. 14, 15, 16. The hum got louder near 17. These lights, Primera side softly adjusting focus. They always burn out near room 19. Socket replaced 3 times. Same result. The bulb above flickered as if hearing me. My reflection in the glass door distorted with each pulse. My hand trembled a bit, the camera catching every movement. At 2:16 a.m., my sensor app beeped. Motion detected for 11 seconds. Motion. East Wing corridor, I reported, staring at the empty frame. Nothing. No air movement. No visible cause. Just a stretch of sterile hallway. The hum subsided. I heard my own breathing. The camera light dimmed for half a second. Battery indicator normal, though. I tapped the side. Power fluctuation again. The smell of antiseptic grew stronger. I could almost taste it. My boots squeaked faintly as I turned the corner. End of corridor. Sign on the wall read, Room 19, nitrogen monoxide entry. Static returned in the audio. I turned the camera off. Back in the monitoring office, I reviewed the footage. Grainy, but intact. The light over room 19's door always dies. For some possession, some pater. Primera lía? Ned back, rubbing my eyes. The file on the desk was old yellowed corners, paper brittle. Patient, Cowl, Margaret, deceased. She had been one of the long-term residents. Cardiac complications. Died in room 19 during the night shift. The report claimed her body was moved at 3 a.m., but no footage ever recovered. Cameras in that wing had failed power, lost logged. I clicked the video again. The frame froze on the door. Taped, labeled, unremarkable. No entry. I remembered the janitor's story. How they'd sealed it, welded it shut after that night. He laughed when he said no one cleans in there. Not worth the noise, he said. I didn't understand what that meant. The corridor light flickered again on the monitor. For a moment, I thought I saw movement behind the frosted glass. Then static filled the feed. 3 nights later, I returned. The corridor smelled of antiseptic and decay, an invisible residue clinging to the walls. My chest-mounted camera blinked red. Battery full. I carried a small toolkit in my notebook over my shoulder. The camera captured the lock on room 19. The key card felt heavy in my hand, cold against my palm. I whispered, "Time to see if what's inside is real." Motion sensors pinged twice, erratically, though no one was there. Static hummed through my headset. I adjusted the strap. Sensors triggered. Again. "No explanation," I murmured. I paused at the door, examining the label. "No entry, do not open." Fingers brushed the metal edge. I noted a subtle chill rising from the room, temperature dropping nearly 5 degrees in a matter of seconds. My heart rate picked up, but I kept the voice calm, professional. "David Harper. Entering room 19. Objective. Observational verification. Proceeding with caution." The hallway was empty. The air felt thick, almost viscous. I inhaled slowly, holding the camera steady. The keycard slid into the slot, clicked. Nothing more than that. The door creaked, long and low, resisting at first, then yielding. The camera captured the hinges, the subtle movements of dust motes dancing in the beam of my flashlight. I peered inside. The room looked empty, yet the bed in the center betrayed something else. The sheet was slightly raised, curved as though recently occupied. I whispered, barely audible, "Mr. Wilkes? Anyone in there? Need to know now." Silence. I stepped in cautiously. The floorboard creaked under my boots. The smell of antiseptic was overpowering. I panned the camera around. Walls bare, equipment covered in dust, yet the bed's sheet remained slightly indented. Static scratched in the audio. My pulse thumped louder than the hum of the air vent. I took a deep breath and began documenting. Furniture, objects, signs of wear. Nothing out of the ordinary appeared, except that sense of being watched, a presence just beyond vision. I tried to rationalize it. Old building, echoes, shadows. Still, the indentation on the bed unsettled me. Flashlight beam cut through the gloom. I moved slowly, checking corners, scanning for anomalies. Cold clung to my hands, breath misted faintly in the air. Temperature dropped further as I approached the far corner. I noted the exact readings in my notebook. 13.2 grados. Previous ambient, 18.5 grados. A sudden drop without explanation. The camera caught nothing unusual, nothing moving yet. He failed Italiano, a faint exhale. A soft, almost imperceptible breathing behind me. I spun, camera whipping around, but the frame revealed emptiness. I held the flashlight steady. Shadows stretched unnaturally. The walls seemed to thicken, compressing around the room. Rationale thought battled unease. The building old, wires faulty, mind overreacting. I backed toward the door, documenting the anomalies, ensuring data integrity. The presence lingered, silent, like a watchful eye. My voice remained calm, recorded. Investigation complete for this entry. No entities visible. Physical anomalies noted. 2 weeks later, I returned to room 19. Chest-mounted, camera ready. Cleaning gear slung over my shoulder. The hallways were eerily silent. Only my boots squeaked faintly on the tiles. I muttered to the camera. Voice low, tired. Final job here. Cataloging the room. The keycard slid into the lock with a reluctant click. I pushed the door open. Dust hung in the air. Motes drifting in the flashlight beam. I stepped in cautiously. Equipment lay covered in grime. The bed's sheet remained slightly curved. I sighed and began my task. Dusting counters, wiping the floor, documenting each movement. The antiseptic smell was heavy, almost suffocating. I moved carefully, aware that this was the first full cleaning since 2014. I glanced at the mirror on the far wall. Reflection, normal, empty room. Yet something felt off. A whisper of cold brushed against my neck. I shook it off. I dusted the shelves, wiped down the floor. The camera captured each movement, chest strap secure. My attention was drawn to the mirror again. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then, shadows moved in the reflection. Multiple patients lying in beds, naked, limbs grotesque and torn, flesh pale. I blinked. Reality intruded. The room remained empty. I turned to check. No one. The reflection lingered. A memory, a vision, or something else entirely. The smell of antiseptic mixed with iron, blood. I gagged. Backing up slowly, I could feel it pooling, saturating the floor beneath me. My heart raced, voice shaking in the camera. First full cleaning since 2014. Smell. Same antiseptic. But now, blood. So much blood. Every movement felt wrong. The reflection twisted with my perception. My hands trembled, but I continued documenting, rationalizing. This was my job, my duty. Still, the room held secrets that no one cleans. I knelt beside the bed. Sheet partially lifted. The camera followed every motion. A sharp gasp escaped me. The lens caught my own reflection in the mirror. Chest cavity open, ribs visible, pale hands slipping from the sheet. The room remained silent except for my ragged breathing. The camera tilted and dropped to the floor, lens pointing toward the ceiling. Shadows stretched, moving independently, yet the floor itself remained bare. I struggled to rise, hands slipping across the floor, slicked with blood. The mirror reflected a horror beyond comprehension. My own body, still in coveralls, in a pool of blood. Muffled gasps, whispered pleas. The heartbeat monitor, bleeding irregularly in my ears. Darkness closed in as the camera fell to static. Vital signs offline. The recording started with a soft click. I adjusted the microphone on my scrub collar and cleared my throat. Night backup check. Megan Ruiz, East Wing Monitoring. My voice was tired but steady. The bank of monitors blinked intermittently. Numbers flickered across screens. Some steady, others spiking without apparent cause. Bed 19 displayed a normal heartbeat despite being unoccupied. I jotted the time and date in my notebook. Beds 4, 8, and 19 are showing active pulses. I said aloud, voice low. All equipment was powered down yesterday. From the background, Elliot replied. Cautious, perhaps interference from old sensors. I'll restart the server. I watched the panels blink. Each screen told a story of anomaly. The data made no sense. My hand hovered over the notebook, recording numbers, fluctuations, timestamps. No panic. Only observation. Only data. The silence in the control room amplified the soft hum of the monitors, a rhythm eerily steady against the irregularities I documented. I suckled through my notes again, pen scratching paper. Each entry confirmed the irregular pulses. I decided to maintain surveillance, meticulous, deliberate. Elliot approached the server console. Fingers worked over keys. Lights flickered with each input. Rebooting now? He said. The monitor panel blinked as the system restarted. Moments passed. The heartbeat on bed 19 remained. Numbers jumped subtly, but consistently. Repetition confirmed it was an error, or at least not one easily explained. I recorded each spike, each anomaly. Lights above dimmed. Hum of the servers punctuated the silence. My focus never wavered. Observation ongoing. I murmured into the mic, noting exact times and readings. No interpretation, no assumption, just numbers, data, and methodical documentation. I reviewed previous recordings, cross-referencing each anomaly. Patterns emerged, subtle but persistent. The empty beds blinked with life. Only the monitors could register, Elliot observed quietly, adjusting cables and checking system integrity. I documented his actions minimally, noting timestamps and any intervention. The control room was quiet, lights reflecting off clean floors. My notebook filled with charts, notes, and observations. Each entry objective, precise, unembellished. Bed 19 still unoccupied, continued to register a heartbeat. I described the rhythm into the recorder, steady and factual. Silence settled over the room again. No speculation, no fear. Only record, only observation. The anomalies existed. Primeta logged them, prepared for continued monitoring. ensuring that every detail was captured accurately and without interpretation. The room was dark, illuminated only by the blinking monitors. I moved slowly to bed 19, hand extended over the sensor. The heartbeat on the screen rose slightly as I approached, and then fell as I withdrew. Touching the sensor changes the reading, I said into the recorder. Voice steady, but noting each fluctuation. Elliot hovered near the server, attempting to disconnect equipment. His hands moved quickly over cables, lights flickering from the adjustments. Each spike was measured and documented. The room's ambient sound emphasized the soft, rhythmic beeping. No reaction, beyond observation. I remained calm, methodical, logging times and amplitudes. The anomaly persisted. Data confirmed what my eyes saw. A technical phenomenon that responded to proximity, yet defied simple explanation. Elliot tugged at the main power line, attempting to isolate the monitor. The heartbeat continued, rising and falling independently. I narrated each variation, noting exact readings and sequences. Monitors flickered under the dim ceiling lights. Wires twisted slightly in response to server adjustments. Each beep sounded louder in the empty room, echoing subtly against the walls. My voice remained calm, detailing every event. Pulse rising. Sensor disconnected. Monitor continuing reading. Bed P 70 ... 70. 2 BPM. Each number was logged and time-stamped. No assumptions were made, only observation and meticulous documentation. Despite repeated attempts to intervene, the phenomena persisted. As I stepped back, I noticed the bips seemed to emanate from multiple directions, not just the monitor directly in front of me. I adjusted the recorder, ensuring clear capture of the ambient sound. The room's temperature and lighting remained stable, but the acoustic environment had changed. Patterns emerged. Small fluctuations, repeated sequences, and synchronized peaks. Each was noted carefully. Elliot watched, silent, his hands hovering near the server, but making no adjustments. I focused entirely on observation, documenting every anomaly without judgment. The experience was unsettling, yet I maintained professional detachment. Data entry was meticulous. Times, amplitudes, and perceived directions of the pulses were all recorded. The phenomena is real, measurable, and observable. I remained objective, letting the evidence speak for itself. I lay on the examination table, EEG sensors applied to my scalp. The room was dim, the monitors casting muted light across the floor. Elliot adjusted the camera on the tripod, ensuring all angles captured the procedure. Testing the source of the electrical noise, I murmured into the recorder, documenting each connection, each reading, each fluctuation. My hand rested on the control console, adjusting parameters. The cables pressed lightly against my skin, warm but firm. Each spike in the monitor I noted meticulously. Every number, every pattern was logged. The beeps, steady yet irregular, echoed softly in the background. No assumptions, only methodical observation. The system behaved unpredictably, yet every anomaly was recorded. Elliot remained observant, silent, capturing data. The tension unspoken yet palpable in the dim room. Suddenly, the monitor began reproducing my voice. Patient 19. Stabilized, echoed through the speakers. My eyes widened, but I kept my tone calm. Elliot glanced at the display, confusion clear in his expression. The heartbeat on bed 19 began to rise rapidly. Numbers climbed. 72, 76, 82 BPM. I reached to check cables. They seemed to shift slightly, responding independently. I narrated every fluctuation. The monitor flickered violently. Lights above stuttered. My calm, precise documentation continued despite the unnerving phenomena. The anomaly grew in both scale and unpredictability. Elliot moved to adjust the server, but the readings continued as if influenced by a source neither of us could control. The room felt electrically alive. Each beep a pulse through the floor, through the walls. One remained methodical, noting every detail, sound, and number. Cabinets rattled. Cables twisted violently across the table. The EEG wires constricted against my wrists and ankles, tightening like living restraints. Monitors blinked rapidly, The room's dim light flashed in erratic bursts. My heart raced. Elliot, shut it down. I shouted, voice trembling but controlled. He worked frantically at the server, pressing keys, yanking cables, sweat beading on his forehead. The system responded with shrill alarms. My voice repeated mechanically through speakers. Patient 19. Critical. Patient 19. Critical. The numbers climbed impossibly. 98. 104. 112 BPM yet. No pulse existed. With a final coordinated effort, Elliot yanked the main power, severing the control circuits. The room went dark. Monitors silent. Cables slack. We gasped. Chests heaving. Adrenaline sharp. I collapsed on the floor, heart racing, still recording every detail. Elliot checked the monitors dead. The anomalies ceased. We escaped the control room alive. The brutal episode logged. The data intact. Objective documentation remained. Cold, technical, terrifying. Yet we survived. Evening rounds. I walked the corridors of St. Marlow with the body cam strapped tight to my chest. The dim lights cast long shadows across the peeling paint and polished floors. My shoes echoed softly, a rhythm of movement in the otherwise silent hallways. "Good evening," I murmured to the first patient's door, voice low, calm. No response came, only the steady beep from the monitor at the far end of the hall, a mechanical heartbeat that refused to fade. Each step was recorded. Every slight flicker of the overhead lights captured in frame. I noted the patient rooms, the closed doors, the cold air pressing from the vents. I approached the distant monitor. Its light glimmered faintly, and the bip persisted, precise and unyielding. I whispered into the mic. Everything seems normal. No unusual sounds, just the monitor's pulse. My pen scratched quietly in the notebook at my side, logging the time. 3:17 a.m. The rhythm of that sound seemed almost purposeful, like it was aware of my presence. I continued down the hall, observing each patient carefully. My hand brushed lightly against the door frames as I passed. "Good evening," I repeated in the next rooms, each time receiving silence. The monitor at the corridor's end never faltered its bip constant. Exact. I checked the clocks on the walls, all marked 3:17 a.m. I stopped to jot notes, documenting the patient rooms, the time, the light flickers. Everything was in order, yet the repetition unsettled me. Shadows shifted oddly in the corners of the hall, subtle movements that didn't match any patient or staff activity. The echo of my steps blended with the persistent bip. I described every motion aloud for the record. Room 2, clear. Room 4, bed empty. Monitor active. Hallway quiet. Even the smallest sounds, the click of a door latch, the creak of a vent were logged, measured, recorded. The precision of the environment was unnerving, but I stayed objective. Back in the supply room, I reviewed the body cam footage. Each corridor, each doorway, each patient interaction was exactly as I remembered. Yet patterns emerged. The same movements, the same shadows, the same unchanging timestamps. I noted these systematically. I returned to the notebook. Patient phrases repeated. Monitor, bip unchanged. Hallways silent, but echo present. Time, 3:17 a.m. Consistently, every observation was recorded without assumption. Every anomaly written factually. No fear, no interpretation, only careful documentation. The quiet was heavy. Even the humming of the fluorescent lights seemed amplified. I set up the camera to record the next round, preparing for the repetition that would inevitably follow. The corridor outside remained still, sterile, yet the sense of something unrecorded lingered between the frames. On my second night, I moved through the same corridor with the same measured gait. The body cam recorded the steady scrape of my shoes and the distant, unwavering beep from the monitor at the far end. As I passed each door, the patients replied with the exact same phrases they had used the night before. Not similar, not approximate, but identical in wording and cadence. The elderly woman in room 3 lifted her hand and said, without variation, "Good evening. Mr. Monroe, at precisely the same time and tone as the previous recording. Every wall clock I checked read 3:17 a.m. I stopped at a window and wrote the time in my notebook. 3:17. Rewound my body cam playback on the small viewer strapped to my arm and watched the footage of last night, comparing frame to frame. The gestures matched, the breaths, the pauses, the tiny throat clear. All of it matched to the second. There was no tremor in their voices, no confusion in their eyes. The repetition was mechanical, but undeniably physical. I documented everything. The words, the pauses, the exact times. My tone remained clinical as I spoke into the mic, detailing observation rather than speculation. The corridor felt like a loop rendered into living flesh. I recorded, logged, and prepared for another pass. By the third night, I started compiling the files on my handheld. Each recording's metadata showed the same date and time, 3:17 a.m. I called it out into the air, quiet and precise. All files indicate 3:17 timestamp. Elliot would have said this was a system error, but I had already checked the recorder S. Internal clock. It matched the facility clock by still, every exported file bore the same frozen marker. I played one clip, then to next, then lined them up visually on the viewer. The body positions, the small coughs, the flick of an eyelid. They overlapped perfectly. Even the faint shuffling from the supply closet repeated in the same microsecond. I wrote down the file names and their properties. Size, duration, checksum. Each file checksum returned, consistent across nights, an impossible duplication if the events were truly independent. I documented my method step by step into the recorder, including the checks I performed on the hardware and the timestamps. There was no editorializing. The uncanny uniformity of the files was recorded as fact. The recordings repeated, the clock remained fixed, and the corridor preserved its own unchanged loop. I spent daylight hours cross-referencing notes. Patterns surfaced with clarity. Phrases repeated verbatim. Clocks frozen at 3:17. Identical micro-movements in the patient's hands. The monitor's beep persisted as a through line. Its rhythm did not vary between takes. I listed the recurring elements in my log. Phrase, timestamp, monitor, pulse, posture. My observations were intentional and clinical. I recorded, then re-recorded, my steps and the passage through each doorway to be certain I was unimposing a pattern where none existed. The recordings confirmed the pattern rather than my presumption. I documented audio levels, room temperature, and light flicker intervals, all within normal ranges. Yet the behavioral and temporal repetition remained. I remained unsensational in voice. In the recorder, I stated the sequence plainly. Patterns confirmed. Repetition consistent across 3 nights. Monitor beep. Plex read 3:17. I filed the notes and labeled the segments for further monitoring. The facility's corridor had hardened into a repeating sequence. My job shifted from routine care to objective surveillance. I reached the emergency exit and found the door ajar. Megan stood there under the weak emergency light, clipboard clutched to her chest. Her face was pale and set. She looked at me with a concentration that felt rehearsed. Behind us, the corridor did not look right. The straight lines of the ceiling warped subtly, like a bad reflection in running water. Shadows pooled along the baseboards and then shifted, as if something underlayered and deeper than shadow moved beneath the surface. I kept the camera steady against my chest and spoke into the mic. Megan. My voice sounded smaller than I felt. She answered in a low voice. You're late for room 19. There was no accusation in it, only mechanical clarity. As we stood there, the ambient noise shifted. The distant monitor's beep took on a hollow quality, multiplied into an echo that seemed to come from inside the walls. We both stepped forward, feet careful on the linoleum. My notebook felt heavy in my pocket. I wrote the time, 3:17 a.m. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and something older, colder. I described the distortion plainly into the recorder, noting each warped panel, each pooling shadow, and the exact words Megan had used. Our movements remained measured. The observation was clinical, even as the space around us refused to remain ordinary. Megan's voice was steady when she said it again. "You were late for room 19. The corridor contracted around us as if the ceiling had dropped a fraction. Doors down the hall slammed one after another, a series of percussion strikes that set the lights to stutter. The sound that followed was not a groan or a scream, but a layering of small, sharp noises, fabric tearing, a dry crack, a rhythmic rasp that I could not identify. It filled my ears and washed over every other sound. I tried to speak. The words came out then. The body cam slipped from my chest. Magan's hand brushed mine. It hit the floor with a hollow click, then still recording. From that low angle, the corridor looked longer, narrower. The shadows pooled like ink spreading across tile. Megan moved forward, and with each step, the air grew colder. I noted the temperature drop into the recorder. A clear, objective measurement. Something that felt like pressure closed around the hallway. An almost tactile weight pressing at our shoulders. We both moved faster. My notes were clipped. I narrated each sound and movement as if reading a checklist. The body cam's audio registered the slaps of our steps, the distant beeping, and then layered over it. The rasping noise increasing in tempo. I recorded the cadence, the timing, and the direction. From behind us, from inside the walls, and all around, the corridor tightened like a fist. Whatever presence we had been tracing made itself direct and physical. Hands, cold and sudden, seized my arms. The grip was relentless and impossible to pry free from. I felt the force pull, a jerking pressure that brought me to my knees. I heard a sharp, unmistakable crack. The sound of something breaking under strain, and my legs failed. I could no longer stand. Megan shouted, a sound full of alarm. Another pressure hit her from the side and threw her against the wall. I heard the dull impact of flesh against plaster and the hollow thud of her body sliding. She tried to lift herself, could not. The forces pressed at our chests, compressing breath, making inhalation shallow and urgent. Every attempt to pull away felt like moving through water while something invisible tightened around our torsos. I narrated into the recorder as long as the breath held. My voice was ragged. I described the direction of the forces, the sounds of impact, the timing of each attempt to escape. The body cam skidded on the floor, still recording, catching the angle of our hands grasping at air and the way our shoes scraped uselessly on time. The pressure increased until it became final. My world narrowed to the sound of my own failing breath, and the last, precise entry declared into the log. Unable to continue. Presence overwhelming. Time. 3:17 a.m. The feed continued for a moment after the sounds ended, recording only the echoing beeps and the quiet settling of the corridor. The camera then recorded the stillness. The hall empty, lights steady, shadows no longer moving, and the last frame showed the corridor stretching out, indifferent and unchanged, while our recorded notes remained, factual and complete.